Rain slid down the cafe window in slow silver threads while the neon open sign flickered softly against the dark street outside. Daniel Reyes sat at the corner table where the overhead light hummed faintly, the bulb casting a dull amber circle over scratched wood and 2 chipped ceramic cups. His jacket, cheap polyester from a department store clearance rack, hung neatly over the back of his chair. Beneath it, his gray maintenance uniform was freshly washed but permanently faded from years of industrial detergent. The smell of roasted coffee and wet asphalt filled the room. Daniel folded his hands together on the table and waited. What no one inside that quiet cafe could have imagined, what not a single person glancing at the tired janitor in the corner could have guessed, was that 15 years earlier Daniel Reyes had dismantled a financial empire worth billions. And that the people he destroyed had spent the next decade making sure the world forgot his name. The door chimed. Cold air slipped into the room, carrying the scent of rain and expensive perfume. Victoria Hale stepped inside. Her hair was pulled back in a casual knot, a dark wool coat wrapped around her shoulders. To anyone watching she looked like a woman who had hurried out without much thought. But the cut of the coat alone cost more than Daniel earned in a month. She scanned the room. Her eyes landed on Daniel. "You must be Daniel," she said, approaching the table. Her voice carried a confidence that did not ask permission. Daniel stood politely. "And you must be Tori." That was the name she had given the matchmaker. Not Victoria. Never Victoria. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Bus was running slow." Daniel nodded. "Rain does that." He said it without judgment. Victoria studied him with quiet curiosity. The matchmaker had described him simply: kind, hard-working, widowed father. The kind of description that usually translated into disappointment. But she had run this experiment dozens of times before. Pretend to be broke. See what happens. It was amazing how quickly people revealed themselves when they believed you had nothing to offer. A waitress approached. Daniel ordered coffee. Victoria ordered the same. When the waitress left, Victoria leaned forward slightly. "So," she said, "what do you do, Daniel?" There it was. The first test. Daniel answered simply. "I work maintenance at the Regency Hotel." Victoria tilted her head. "Maintenance?" "Janitorial mostly." He said it plainly. No apology. No embarrassment. Just the truth. Victoria gave a small nod, though the corner of her mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "And you like it?" Daniel shrugged lightly. "It pays the rent." Outside, a car splashed through a puddle, the sound slapping against the window glass. Victoria crossed her arms on the table. "So that's the plan?" she asked. "Just maintenance forever?" Daniel didn't react. Not outwardly. Inside, he was thinking about Sophia. About the way she had hugged him that afternoon before he left for the date. "Go have fun, Dad." Her small voice had carried so much hope. "I'm not much of a planner," Daniel said calmly. Victoria let out a quiet laugh. "I guess not." At the counter, 2 college students whispered to each other while pretending not to stare. Victoria noticed them. An audience. Interesting. She leaned back in her chair, studying Daniel more openly now. "So you're raising a daughter on a janitor's salary?" "Yes." "That must be challenging." Daniel nodded. "It is." Victoria stirred her coffee slowly. "Don't you ever wish you'd done more with your life?" The question hung in the air like smoke. For a moment the cafe seemed quieter. Daniel looked down at his cup. Steam curled upward in thin white ribbons. In his mind he saw a courtroom 15 years earlier. Flashbulbs. Headlines. Threats. He had done more. Far more. And it had cost him everything. But none of that belonged in this room. So he simply said, "I did what I thought was right." Victoria frowned slightly. "That's not really an answer." Daniel smiled gently. "Sometimes it is." She leaned forward again. "But don't you want more money? More success?" Daniel looked up at her. His eyes were calm. Success means different things to different people. Victoria's smile sharpened. That sounds like something people say when they've given up. The college students nearby were definitely listening now. Daniel felt the moment shift. Humiliation was a familiar temperature. Cool. Predictable. He had lived in colder rooms than this. Victoria tapped her fingernail against the table. I mean, come on, she said lightly. You're a janitor. The word landed harder than she intended. Don't you think your daughter deserves a father with a little ambition? The room went still. The waitress paused behind the counter. Daniel said nothing for several seconds. Then he reached for the check. We only ordered coffee, Victoria said. I know. He placed a few bills on the table. More than enough. Victoria blinked. You're leaving? Daniel stood and slipped on his jacket. I should get home. My daughter has school in the morning. She stared at him. You're not even going to argue? Daniel paused beside the table. For the first time there was something deeper in his eyes. Not anger. Not shame. Just a quiet, immovable dignity. I hope you find what you're looking for, Tori. Then he walked toward the door. The bell chimed softly as he stepped into the rain. Victoria sat motionless. Something about that exchange felt wrong. Men usually defended themselves. Or bragged. Or got angry. Daniel Reyes had done none of those things. Across the cafe, a middle-aged man slowly lowered his newspaper. His eyes followed Daniel through the rain-streaked window. Recognition had just dawned on his face. And under his breath, the man whispered two words that no one else in the room heard. Daniel Reyes. The name carried a weight the cafe could not yet understand. Morning light spilled across the polished marble floors of the Regency Hotel lobby, turning the surface into a pale mirror that reflected chandeliers, velvet ropes, and the quiet rhythm of people who believed their time was more valuable than everyone else's. Daniel Reyes pushed a yellow cleaning cart across the floor with steady hands. The wheels squeaked softly with each turn. He wore the same gray maintenance uniform from the night before, though now the fabric smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and industrial polish. His sleeves were rolled neatly at the wrists. A small plastic badge clipped to his chest read maintenance staff in plain black letters. Invisible. That was the word Daniel had learned to live inside. A businessman in a navy suit walked past him without a glance. Two tourists stepped carefully around his mop bucket as if it were a minor inconvenience in the architecture of the building. Daniel didn't mind. He had long ago accepted that people rarely saw the things that kept their world clean. Or the people who did the cleaning. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A text message. Sophia, did your date go okay? Daniel allowed himself a small smile. He wiped his hands on a folded cloth before typing back. Daniel, it was interesting. 3 dots appeared immediately. Sophia, that means no. He chuckled quietly. 8-year-olds had an uncanny ability to translate adult language. Another message arrived. Sophia, you should try again though. You deserve someone nice. Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket, feeling the warmth of it through the fabric. Deserve. That word always felt complicated. Across the lobby, the glass entrance doors slid open. Cold morning air drifted inside. Daniel glanced up without thinking. And froze. Victoria Hale walked into the lobby. Today she was dressed differently than the woman from the cafe. No worn wool coat. No tired bus rider. Instead she wore a tailored charcoal blazer and heels that clicked sharply across the marble floor. A slim leather folder rested under her arm. Executives trailed behind her like shadows. Daniel recognized her immediately. Not as Tori, but as Victoria Hale. CEO. Tech billionaire. Philanthropist. Her face appeared on financial news screens mounted above the hotel bar nearly every week. She was not supposed to be here. Not like this. Victoria stopped abruptly when she saw him. For a moment the two simply stared at each other across the lobby. Her expression shifted from recognition, to shock, to something harder to name. You work here? She asked. Daniel rested both hands lightly on the handle of the cleaning cart. Yes. The executives behind her looked confused. Victoria stepped closer. You're the janitor from last night. Daniel nodded once. And you're not unemployed. The statement wasn't accusatory. Just factual. Victoria felt heat creep up her neck. She had been exposed. Not just exposed. Caught. But the part that unsettled her most was the absence of anger in Daniel's voice. Most men would have demanded an explanation. Or at least an apology. Daniel simply waited. Victoria cleared her throat. It's a long story. I imagine it is. A silence settled between them. Then one of the executives stepped forward. Ms. Hale, the Foundation board is waiting upstairs. Victoria glanced at Daniel again. Something about his composure still bothered her. He wasn't impressed. He wasn't intimidated. He wasn't even curious. It was as if the revelation meant nothing to him. Impulsively, she said, You should come tonight. Daniel frowned slightly. Tonight? Our charity gala, she explained. Same building. Ballroom level. Daniel gestured lightly toward his uniform. I don't think I'm dressed for it. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Borrow a suit. Behind her, the executives exchanged confused glances. She never invited strangers to board events. Why? Daniel asked calmly. Victoria hesitated. Because she needed to understand him. Because no one reacted to her the way he had. Because something about Daniel Reyes felt like a locked door she suddenly needed to open. Consider it an apology, she said. Daniel studied her face for a long moment. Then he sighed softly. My daughter says I should give people second chances. Victoria raised an eyebrow. So that's a yes? Daniel nodded once. Just for a little while. That evening the hotel ballroom glittered with soft, golden light. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with pale clouds. Hundreds of donors filled the room, their voices blending into a low current of expensive conversation. Daniel stood near the back wall in a borrowed suit that fit slightly too large across the shoulders. The fabric still smelled faintly of dry cleaning chemicals. He adjusted the cuff awkwardly. This world was not unfamiliar. That was the strange part. He knew the language of it. The posture. The quiet territorial dance of power between wealthy men. He had simply chosen to step away from it. Victoria approached with 2 glasses of sparkling water. You clean the floors here, she said. And tonight you're drinking with billionaires. Daniel accepted the glass. Life is unpredictable. Victoria smirked. You're still not impressed. Daniel took a sip. I'm observing. At that moment, across the room, a cluster of executives gathered around a large digital display showing live donations for the charity foundation. Suddenly the screen flickered. Numbers froze. A technician tapped the keyboard nervously. Systems locked, someone muttered. Another donor frowned. That dashboard controls tonight's pledges. Panic rippled quietly through the group. Victoria stepped forward. What's happening? The technician shook his head. The donation system is stuck in a loop. The server's rejecting new transactions. How long to fix it? Hours, maybe. Murmurs spread through the ballroom. Millions of dollars in pledges were suddenly suspended. Daniel watched the screen from across the room. Then he quietly set down his glass. May I see it? The technician looked at him. Confused. Victoria crossed her arms. Let him. Daniel stepped closer to the terminal. His fingers moved across the keyboard. Not hesitantly. Not guessing. But with calm, precise familiarity. He studied the lines of code flashing across the system window. Then he spoke quietly. Your authentication protocol is looping because 2 donor gateways are conflicting. The technician blinked. What? Daniel typed a short command. The system refreshed. The frozen numbers began moving again. New donations appeared instantly. The ballroom went silent. The technician stared at the screen. That shouldn't have worked. Daniel stepped back. Your firewall patch is outdated. The technician looked at him again, completely baffled. Across the room, Victoria watched Daniel Reyes in stunned silence. A janitor had just solved a complex financial network error in seconds. The room was quiet. Not the polite quiet of wealthy donors, but the heavy quiet of people realizing something didn't add up. Victoria spoke slowly. Daniel. He turned toward her. How does a janitor know how to do that? Daniel met her gaze. For a moment he considered telling the truth. Instead he said something else. Old habits. Across the ballroom, a tall man near the bar had been watching the entire exchange. His face had gone pale. Because unlike everyone else in the room, he knew exactly who Daniel Reyes was, and why he should never have been allowed inside this building. The ballroom air had grown warmer as the night deepened, thick with perfume, polished wood, and the faint metallic scent of expensive champagne. But across the room, Marcus Langford felt cold. Very cold. He stood near the bar with one hand wrapped around a glass of scotch he had not touched, his eyes fixed on the quiet man standing beside Victoria Hale. Daniel Reyes? For a moment Marcus had hoped he was mistaken. But the way Daniel moved at the keyboard earlier, the confidence, the efficiency, the unsettling calm, had erased all doubt. Marcus had seen that before. 15 years ago. In a courtroom that had nearly destroyed him. Across the ballroom, Daniel stood near a tall window overlooking the city. The glass reflected the golden chandelier light, turning the skyline into scattered jewels against the night. Victoria approached him slowly. You still haven't answered my question, she said. Daniel turned slightly. Which one? How a janitor fixes a financial server faster than a tech consultant. Daniel slipped his hands into his pockets. Curiosity, he said. Victoria exhaled through her nose. That's not an answer either. Daniel looked back toward the ballroom. Donors were laughing again. The tension from the system failure had already dissolved into casual conversation. Wealth moved quickly past problems. Victoria studied his face. You don't belong where you say you do. Daniel's expression softened just slightly. Most people don't, he said. Before she could press further, a voice interrupted behind them. Ms. Hale. Marcus Langford approached with smooth confidence. He wore a dark-tailored suit that fit like armor, his silver hair neatly combed back, his smile controlled and professional. Victoria turned. Marcus. Everything all right with the system? Marcus nodded. Our technicians are reviewing it now. His eyes shifted to Daniel. Measured. Careful. And who is this? Victoria gestured lightly. Daniel Reyes. The name landed between them like a stone dropped into deep water. Marcus's smile held. But something flickered behind his eyes. Pleasure to meet you, he said. Daniel nodded once. Likewise. For several seconds the two men simply looked at each other. Marcus felt his heartbeat in his throat. Daniel showed no sign of recognition. Which was somehow worse. Victoria noticed the tension immediately. You two know each other? Marcus answered smoothly. I don't believe so. Daniel said nothing. The silence stretched one beat too long. Marcus turned back to Victoria. I'm going to check the financial terminals, he said. Excuse me. He walked away quickly. But not before casting one last glance over his shoulder. Minutes later Marcus pushed through a side door into a private service hallway. The ballroom music faded behind him, replaced by the low mechanical hum of ventilation fans. He pulled out his phone. His voice dropped to a whisper. It's him. A pause. No mistake. Another pause. Yes. Daniel Reyes? The voice on the other end spoke rapidly. Marcus's jaw tightened. I thought he was gone too. He rubbed his temple. No. If he's here, it's not coincidence. Marcus ended the call and leaned against the wall. 15 years. 15 years he had buried that name. Daniel Reyes had been a financial forensic analyst who once uncovered a web of corporate fraud so intricate it had nearly brought down 3 major firms. Marcus had been one of the architects behind that network. Daniel had dismantled it piece by piece. Evidence. Records. Testimony. Marcus had survived only because powerful friends destroyed Daniel's credibility first. Lawsuits. Investigations. Blacklisting. By the end of it, Daniel Reyes had vanished from the industry entirely. Marcus had assumed the man was broken. Gone. But tonight he had walked straight into Marcus's world again. And worse. Victoria Hale had invited him. Marcus straightened slowly. This could not be allowed to continue. Back in the ballroom, Victoria still watched Daniel with quiet fascination. "You're very good at avoiding questions," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. "It's a useful skill." She leaned closer. "What were you before the janitor job?" Daniel's eyes drifted toward the chandelier above them. For a moment, something old passed across his face. "I used to investigate numbers." Victoria frowned. "Investigate? Financial systems," Daniel said. "Corporate accounts. Things like that. Like an auditor?" "Something like that." Victoria folded her arms. "And you gave that up to clean hotel floors?" Daniel's gaze returned to the room. "I didn't give it up." "You lost it." Daniel didn't answer. Victoria realized something then. The quiet dignity she had noticed the night before, it wasn't resignation. It was survival. "Someone hurt you," she said quietly. Daniel's jaw tightened just slightly. "People make choices," he replied. "And sometimes the consequences arrive years later." Across the room, security guards suddenly began moving toward them. Victoria frowned. "What's going on?" One of the guards approached. "Ms. Hale, we need a moment with your guest." Daniel remained perfectly still. Victoria stepped forward. "For what reason?" The guard hesitated. Then another voice spoke behind them. "Because our financial systems have been compromised." Marcus Langford stepped forward, flanked by 2 additional security officers. His expression was grave. "Unfortunately," Marcus continued, "the access log shows someone attempted to breach the donor account servers." Murmurs spread through nearby guests. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "And?" Marcus looked directly at Daniel. "And the login terminal used was the one Mr. Reyes accessed earlier tonight." The words landed with brutal clarity. The surrounding donors turned. Whispers erupted. Daniel felt dozens of eyes settle on him. Security stepped closer. "Sir," one guard said, "we're going to need you to come with us." Victoria stared at Marcus. "You're accusing him of hacking our charity system?" Marcus sighed heavily. "I'm afraid the evidence leaves us little choice." Daniel said nothing. Not a word. Victoria searched his face for anger, denial, anything. Instead, she saw only calm acceptance. "Daniel?" she said quietly. He met her gaze. "I didn't steal anything." His voice was steady. But Marcus was already turning to the security guards. "Escort him out." Hands closed around Daniel's arms. Across the ballroom, hundreds of wealthy donors watched the janitor being led away. Whispers followed him through the crowd. Victoria stood frozen. And for the first time that night, doubt began to creep into her mind. Because Marcus Langford looked relieved. And Daniel Reyes did not look like a guilty man. Behind the ballroom doors, the hallway lights buzzed softly as security pushed Daniel toward a private office. The doors shut behind them with a heavy click. One guard reached for a pair of handcuffs. Daniel looked at the desk in the corner of the room. Then he spoke quietly. "You should check the Foundation's offshore accounts." The guards exchanged confused looks. Daniel leaned back in the chair. Calm. Unshaken. "Because if Marcus Langford thinks I came here without evidence." He let the sentence hang in the air. Outside the door, the gala music continued playing. Inside the room, a different kind of storm was beginning. The fluorescent lights of the private office cast a sterile glare across the walls, bouncing off pale gray paint and a single metal desk. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet, a stark contrast to the warm golden glow of the ballroom just beyond the doors. Rain pattered against the windows, slower now, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Daniel Reyes sat in the stiff plastic chair at the center of the room, hands resting lightly on his knees. The guards on either side shifted uneasily, as if expecting some sudden movement, some violent outburst. None came. He had been led here on a fabricated accusation. Marcus Langford had spun a story that Daniel had attempted to hack the charity donation system, that his sudden knowledge of the server error made him a threat. It had worked flawlessly in the moment. The room outside had frozen. Patrons and donors had gasped. Victoria Hale had stared. Marcus had smiled, triumphant. But Daniel had anticipated this. His fingers hovered over his jacket pocket, where a small, encrypted USB drive rested. It contained everything Marcus had stolen from the Foundation over the past 5 years. Offshore accounts. Hidden shell corporations. Laundered donations. Names. Dates. Transfers. Proof impossible to deny. Daniel had prepared for tonight months ago, carefully tracking the Foundation's discrepancies whenever he had access during maintenance rounds. The gala had been the perfect stage, Victoria hailed the unwitting signal. A soft knock echoed on the door. The guards looked toward it, tense. A voice whispered from the threshold. "Daniel?" He turned slightly. Recognition softened his expression. "Rachel," he said. She stepped in cautiously, holding a tablet under her arm. Rachel Whitaker, investigative journalist, had been tracking Marcus Langford's network for over a decade. She had once tried to interview Daniel years ago, but he had refused, vanished into anonymity to protect his daughter. Now she had found him. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded once. "He's set the stage perfectly." Rachel handed him the tablet. He scrolled quickly, double-checking numbers, cross-referencing transactions. Everything matched. Everything connected. Marcus's past crimes and current misappropriations were fully documented. Outside the ballroom, the party continued, unaware of the storm about to break. Rachel whispered, "When we reveal this, it will all be public. Marcus can't stop it." Daniel leaned back, eyes closed briefly. He imagined Sophia tucked into bed, asleep, unaware of the shadow still pursuing him after all these years. He drew in a quiet breath, steadying himself. "I never wanted it this way," he murmured. "But some truths can't be buried forever." Rachel nodded. "Shall we?" Daniel rose slowly. Every movement precise, controlled. He handed the USB drive and tablet back to Rachel, then followed her out of the office. The hallway smelled faintly of rain and polished marble. The distant music of the gala drifted in, unaware of the unfolding reckoning. They stepped into the ballroom through the side service doors. The crowd parted instinctively at the sight of them. Victoria Hale turned immediately, her eyes widening when she saw Daniel standing not in submission, but in quiet command. "Daniel?" she breathed. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. Rachel stepped forward to the microphone, holding the tablet high. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we have discovered evidence of long-term embezzlement in the Foundation. Millions of dollars have been siphoned into offshore accounts controlled by Marcus Langford." Gasps rippled through the room. Donors muttered, executives whispered, champagne glasses clinked nervously. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she processed the words. Marcus's composure shattered. He opened his mouth, but no words emerged. Security officers nearby froze, unsure how to proceed. Rachel continued, projecting the evidence onto the large digital screens behind the stage. A cascade of numbers, bank statements, and emails scrolled across the monitors. Every transaction meticulously documented, every signature matched. The room went silent. Daniel stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "This network has existed for years," he said. "It was designed to hide funds from donors, to line personal accounts. Marcus Langford was its architect. I exposed part of it 15 years ago. Tonight, we finish the story." Victoria looked at him, stunned. You knew?" "I did," Daniel said. And I chose to wait until I could protect my daughter, and until the truth could be undeniable. Marcus's face turned pale. The veneer of confidence had evaporated. He opened his mouth to speak, but a security officer shook his head. The murmurs swelled. Donors and guests murmured in disbelief. Cameras flashed, phones recorded. For once, Marcus had no control. Victoria's gaze shifted between Daniel and Marcus. She saw for the first time the man she had humiliated, the janitor she had dismissed and underestimated. He had been testing her too, not out of pride, but out of integrity. Her voice was quiet but clear. I had no idea. Daniel looked at her without anger. You treated me as you would anyone you believed had nothing to offer. But I had nothing to prove to you. I acted for the truth. A long pause stretched between them, filled only by the faint hum of the ballroom ventilation. The silence was heavier than any argument or accusation. Then, with deliberate calm, Daniel added, Integrity isn't measured by the wealth you display. It's measured by the choices you make when no one is watching. The weight of his words settled across the room like falling rain. Donors nodded, executives shifted uncomfortably, and Victoria felt a pang of regret she could not hide. Marcus Langford was taken into custody shortly thereafter, his protests drowned out by the mounting evidence and the recording devices capturing his every move. Daniel watched as the man who had once destroyed his life was led away. He felt no satisfaction, only quiet resolve. Victoria approached him slowly, the noise of the ballroom fading around them. I owe you an apology, she said. Her voice was measured. And I underestimated you. All of you. You never asked for recognition, but you deserved it. Daniel inclined his head slightly. Thank you, he said. His attention shifted briefly to the ballroom's golden chandeliers, reflecting the aftermath of the night's revelations. Then he turned back to Victoria. That's enough for tonight. She studied him, noting the calm certainty in his posture. Will you stay? Or... I have other responsibilities, Daniel replied. Responsibilities that truly matter. Victoria watched him walk away, realizing finally the depth of the man she had so casually judged. He moved through the crowd, a quiet force untouched by ego or desire for vengeance. As Daniel exited through the service doors, rain had returned to patter gently against the glass above the ballroom entrance. The night air was cool against his face, carrying the faint scent of wet pavement and polished marble. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something he hadn't in a long while, closure. But not triumph. Not arrogance. Only the quiet, steady knowledge that justice had been served, not through force, not through anger, but through patient, precise action and unbroken integrity. And somewhere in the distance, Sophia slept, unaware that her father had once again carried the weight of the world, and laid it down safely before her morning light. Morning sunlight spilled over the rooftops of the city, turning the wet streets into a scattered mosaic of gold and gray. Daniel Reyes walked slowly beside his daughter, Sophia, her small hand warm in his. The rhythm of her skipping feet echoed softly against the pavement, mingling with the distant hum of early traffic and the faint clatter of a streetcar. Daniel adjusted the strap of his worn canvas backpack, feeling the familiar weight of lunch boxes, school supplies, and the small bag of toiletries he kept for Sophia's after-school activities. He glanced down at her, noting the concentration in her tiny frown as she balanced along the curb. You okay, Dad? She asked. Better than okay, he replied. Just enjoying the walk. The city around them had already resumed its routine. Businessmen in sharp suits rushed past, coffee cups in hand. Construction crews hammered rhythmically at a nearby site. The air smelled faintly of rain-soaked asphalt and blooming cherry trees from the small park they were passing. Daniel had returned to the life he had deliberately chosen, quiet, unassuming, yet defined by the choices that truly mattered. The gala, the confrontation, the public exposure of Marcus Langford, these events had shifted the world around him, yet he remained unchanged at his core. Victoria Hale's apology had been sincere, delivered privately and without fanfare. She had offered him a position overseeing corporate ethics in her company, A role with influence, power, and salary far beyond what Daniel had ever imagined. He had declined. Power was never his goal. Influence over others' perception, wealth, or status had never been the measure of his life. Integrity, patience, and his daughter's well-being were. Instead, he had agreed to assist in rebuilding the foundation, but on his terms, transparent, accountable, and with no room for hidden agendas. He would ensure the funds reached their intended purpose, that donations served the people they were meant to serve, and that no one, no matter how powerful, could manipulate them unchecked. Sophia skipped ahead a few paces, pausing to inspect a puddle. She bent down, stirring the reflection of the sky with her finger. "Look, Dad," she said. "It's like the clouds are upside down." Daniel smiled, crouching beside her. "Sometimes the world looks upside down. But you can always find the right perspective if you take a moment to see it clearly." She grinned, splashing water lightly. "Like when you fix something nobody else can?" He ruffled her hair, the familiar weight of responsibility and love settling across his shoulders. "Exactly like that." They continued walking toward the school gates, the sound of children's laughter growing louder with each step. Daniel noticed a small bronze plaque at the corner of the playground, dedicated to those who make the world better quietly, without expectation of reward. He paused, reading it carefully. A quiet resonance filled him. Recognition, even indirect, mattered little. It was the choices, the unseen efforts, that defined a person. At the school entrance, teachers greeted Sophia and Daniel with cheerful nods. Daniel exchanged polite words, careful to maintain the distance his position demanded. He had learned over the years that humility did not require invisibility, but it did require consistency. Sophia skipped toward the playground, her laughter ringing across the yard. Daniel watched her for a long moment, taking in the small details: the sun catching her dark hair, the glint of her shoes against the wet asphalt, the way she carried herself with the ease of a child who trusts the world is safe in her hands. He took a deep breath. Behind him, the city continued its indifferent pulse. Somewhere across town, Victoria Hale would oversee the foundation, ensuring that Daniel's warnings and corrections were implemented. Marcus Langford would face justice. Systems would be audited. Lives would be corrected where greed had caused harm. And yet, Daniel would remain in the margins, quietly present in the life he had chosen, with no fanfare, no recognition, and no desire for applause. The rhythm of the world continued, footsteps on wet pavement, distant car horns, the flutter of pigeons overhead. But Daniel's mind was calm, anchored in the clarity of a life lived deliberately. He adjusted Sophia's backpack, straightening the straps, a small gesture of care and attention. "Ready for school?" he asked. "Ready," she said brightly, gripping his hand again. He followed her into the playground, listening to the laughter and chatter, the ordinary noises of ordinary life. And in that quiet, he felt a deep satisfaction. Not the satisfaction of revenge. Not the satisfaction of triumph. But the quiet, persistent satisfaction of being seen, in the truest sense, by the world that mattered most, his daughter. As he watched Sophia climb the jungle gym, Daniel reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The humiliation in the cafe. The test of patience and character. The unexpected confrontation with the world's elite. The dark nights of reflection and fear. All of it had led to this, a return to the values he had always held. A life where dignity, integrity, and love were the measure of success. And in the midst of the ordinary, Daniel finally understood something profound. Not everyone needed to see him to recognize his worth. Some truths required no audience. Some victories were measured in the quiet, deliberate choices that shaped life when no one was watching. He exhaled softly, feeling the cool morning air fill his lungs. The city hummed around him, indifferent yet alive, chaotic yet steady. He had returned to the life he had always chosen, and in doing so, he had preserved what truly mattered. Because the greatest strength a person can possess is not power. It is the dignity to remain who you are when no one is watching. Daniel Reyes straightened his shoulders, adjusted his jacket, and stepped forward, his hand guiding Sophia toward the school gates, toward the ordinary life that held extraordinary meaning. And for the first time in a long time, he smiled, not because the world had acknowledged him, not because justice had been served, but because he had remembered who he was. And that was enough. The world might overlook a man like Daniel Reyes. But he never overlooked himself.